of all.
Mm-hmm.
All. And it's not like partially or some, it's 100%. And that's really a context of verse in which, for salvation, for those who don't know Jesus Christ, when you confess, he forgives us of all. And that's the
Right.
peace of mind that we get. Not that we have to go daily and make sure we account for every wrong thing that we did. We would never be able to do that. We would fail once again, much like all the old covenants in the Old Testament. We failed God. That's not how this new one's built. It's built upon Christ and nothing less.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's Farley that says, right, we a lot of times we'll confess hundreds of sins when we've actually committed thousands. So what
Yeah.
happens to the other hundreds that we forgot, or the thousands that we forgot about?
Yeah. If we're
It's just
using that economy, it's broken, right? We can never do it.
no, we couldn't keep up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey, man, I just kind of wrap up here a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your ministry in San Antonio, how that came to be? And you guys seem like a very community-centered church. So tell me a little bit about the Arsenal.
Yeah, so the Arsenal is it's definitely community and relationship centered church, and even church I use loosely. I know earlier you said church with air quotes. I think it was.
Yes.
In fact, if you look at most of our like material marketing or graphics or anything, it usually just says Arsenal on it, and that was on purpose. So we planted a church in an area of San Antonio that's called Southtown. And Southtown is the arts district of San Antonio. It's just south of downtown. Really just a place where it's a really cool place. It's local restaurants, it's art. It's just really beautiful. There's a lot of culture and fun.
Right.
It's kind of a part of town where there's like gentrification that's going on. So you've got, a massive mix of everything from socioeconomic levels to race and it's just a really cool area.
Yeah.
And so there's a long story on how all that came about, but the short story is God placed us down here, and we started without a lead pastor. I was the youth and young adults pastor, and was asked to rebrand. We'd gone through kind of a church split, and we're kind of left not knowing where we were going or what God was going to do, and I was asked to kind of rebrand and focus us in a direction. And so I have a background in design, and went to school for graphic and web design. So I was like, I'd love to. I'll do that.
Sure.
So I did that in the hopes that we could kind of place this community down here that was really for and focus on people that had been hurt by the church, or had walked away from the church for some reason. So when we first did it, like I said, church wasn't on a lot of the stuff that we put. We named it the Arsenal, and in my head, I just wanted people to be like, man, I'm going to the Arsenal this weekend. And
right?
and it's funny when I tell people the name, and I remember when I first started telling people that we were going to name it the Arsenal, they're like, well, what are we doing, Chad? We're going to war? And I was like, well, no, that's not the point of it. One, the idea was there's an area of this part of town called the Arsenal District.
Yes.
And so it was kind of based off that. But then when I looked up the definition in Webster's dictionary of the Arsenal, or of Arsenal, the third definition just jumped out at me. And it says this. It says Arsenal is a group of people or things that are available to be used.
Oh, wow, man. That's cool.
And when I saw that, I was like, that's it. Like,
Yeah,
that's
man.
us. Now I got to figure out how to sell this idea to the elders and to the church.
Sure.
And so that's where we kind of grasped and got our name. We planted the church, like I said, down in this area. And the idea was we want to be a relational church, everything based on relationship. And so we planted in January of 2017. April of 2017, the elders voted and asked that I would step in as lead pastor. And I was not sure that, I just wanted to hang out with youth. Like youth and young adults, they're easy. Most of the problems I saw with the youth or young adults was because of parents. So I didn't want to deal with, the people that I thought at the time I thought were the problem. And so, but I did feel like God was kind of calling us in that direction. And so, we stepped in, and it's been fun and stressful and messy. And anything and everything that you could think of for a church plant, we set up and tear down every week.
Yeah.
But we've got such a cool, just community of people. I mean, honestly, I was telling somebody the other day, I think at any given time, we've probably got 30% of our congregation that has gone through, or still in some type of recovery program. and I mean, if we're being honest, we're all in some kind of recovery program,
for
right?
sure, right?
And it's just fun. So we set out to say we want to be different.
Yeah.
We don't want to just do church to do church.
Right.
And it's hard because I default to what I know, and what I know is how to do church.
Right.
And I don't want to do church differently just to be different. I really want us to know why we're doing it. Like, why are we doing church? Why do we do something differently than what you may expect from church on a Sunday morning? And if I can answer that with because it fosters relationship and it brings us closer in community, then I think we're heading in the right direction.
Bingo.
And so that's what we do. It's funny, last week I got to preach on Sunday. I'd had somebody that was going to preach, and they had a really busy week and had to kind of step out later in the week. And I got to step in and speak, and I was finishing out Romans 8. The last 8 chapters. We've gone Romans 1 through 8, and I was finishing out, not the last 8 chapters, the last 8 verses of Romans 8. But before I started, I said, you know what, somebody grab a microphone, and I'm going to ask some questions, and I want your answers. I want to see what you share if you want to share. And my buddy Jay just ran around the places. People raised their hands, and I asked the question, like, what has God spoken to you, like, as we've walked through Romans? And that was incredible to hear. And then the last question I asked was, what is your biggest fear when it comes to God? And we were getting ready to step into those last verses of Romans 8, where it says, if God is for me, who can be against me? And man, it was so fun to listen to people answer their questions and vulnerably share where they're at and what they've believed and what God has just kind of spoken through Romans to them. And we finished, and I spoke for a few minutes at the end, and I got so many text messages and people coming up to me. They're like, that is the most fun I have in church, when you let other people talk.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's the best thing that a pastor wants to hear, right? Like, oh, so it's better when other people talk. But it's so true. Like, when we get to hear people that we sit next to, that we're in life, that we're doing life with, talk about where they've struggled, where God has brought them to, I guess, testify to what God has done. And it's been so fun. So now I'm in a place where a buddy of mine from church that's in a church that's always challenging me is like, hey, what does it look like to do more questions? And I looked at a book yesterday about how Jesus, most of his ministry, he answered questions with questions.
Yes.
And I think I read something yesterday that said Jesus was asked 187 questions, and he answered 3 of them. And I was like, man, but we're so busy trying to give answers in the
Yeah.
church instead of pointing people to an answer. And I think the only way that people come to know the answer is to really ask their own questions.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's part of what we're doing.
Super cool, man. That's awesome.
Just loving on the community. We want to be focused on a community church. My goal, I say my goal, I'd get in trouble for that with some of my Grace friends. Not really. I mean, a goal, but my focus is that we would be a community church. So we're in Southtown, San Antonio. I would love for us to be made up of people of Southtown.
Yeah, man.
And not, I love our transient folks and the people that come in and the people that travel, but my hope is that they're here so that we can reach and love on the people of Southtown. And so that's kind of where we're
awesome.
At. We do.
Yeah, man.
We do outreach here, and that's our goal.
Yeah, no, I can just, hearing you to talk about that just shows, and I can clearly understand how God's using you in that ministry just to impact the lives of people, to understanding what grace really is. And I think, early church, man, I think that is the core of what the early church was. It wasn't like they had, their 3-4 songs, collected an offering, had an invitation at the end. That's what we've modernized church to be. I literally think it was brothers and sisters in Christ getting together, talking about the problems and pointing them to Jesus. And that's the core of what it should be. And I think that's why small groups at times are so impactful in a lot of church, because that happens more than I think we should be taught and should be educated. And trust me, I appreciate a good sermon and some great teaching, but I think there's that element of having a true community, because the church are the people. And if we can't relate and interact with them and get them to share who they are and their struggles, we miss the mark. Of really doing, and I maybe use that term loosely again, of doing church, but I think that's the importance of church and why we have that camaraderie and community, to, like you said, what you're doing there. Lastly,
Absolutely.
Man, you said you have a design background. I guess that parlays nicely into what you're focusing on right now with the Graybird Cap Company. Tell me a little bit about that quickly, man, as we kind of wrap up the podcast here today.
Yeah, I do. So background in design and apparel, and I love it. Even with the Arsenal at the church, I'm always designing new apparel for the church. I love it. But last year I was in Guatemala with a good buddy of mine, actually a guy I went to high school with, who's also a pastor here in San Antonio. We were in Guatemala. We both kind of have a heart and a passion to see or to work in the anti-sex trafficking world. And so we've met with some people, and we're talking about, while we're in Guatemala, we're talking about, what does it look like to start a nonprofit, to really bring awareness to this massive problem. Really, disaster, not even just a crisis, but a disaster that's happened. And is prevalent even in our country. And down here in Texas and San Antonio is a hot spot for sex trafficking. And so we were just focused on that, and got to the point where we said, you know what, maybe doing a nonprofit's not the right way. Let's find some nonprofits that we really agree with and align with them, and kind of use some of our talents and our passions to help bring awareness. And so that's where Graybird was birthed. We started a hat company. Both Mike and I are in our mid-30s, and our hairlines are going the wrong direction, and so we wear hats a lot, and we just said, you know what, I think hats kind of run the gamut as far as who wears them. And so we started Graybird Cap Co. And the focus, the logo, if you've seen the logo, it's a bird with a really long tail. And the bird is actually the logo is based off of a bird called a quetzal, that is found in the mountains and the jungles of Guatemala. It's a bird that's become and is known and stands for freedom, because when they're kept in captivity, they either die in captivity, or when they are in captivity, when released, they're just a shell of themselves. And so it was kind of a good correlation with this human trafficking and setting people free and not keeping people caged up. And so that's where